Chaos erupted when my stepdad, Jericho, snagged my wrist in the shadowy living room, his voice quivering with something wild. I'd just stumbled in, drenched from a stormy night and buzzing from a date that imploded spectacularly, dumped, humiliated, mascara streaking my cheeks. He was right there, way too close, intensity radiating, insisting I was too good for the mess I'd waded through. My mom, Tansy, was thanked out upstairs, dead to the world after her shift, while his grip tightened, pulling me in until I could barely catch my breath. Months of sneaky glances and near brushes exploded right then, electric, unstoppable, teetering on the brink. What happened next flipped my world upside down, and trust me, you won't believe how wild it got. I'd fumbled through the front door of our creaky house in Missoula, Montana, my head spinning from too many rum and colas at a gritty bar downtown. My date, Soren, had ghosted me midnight when his phone kept blowing up. Turns out he had a girlfriend stashed somewhere, and he bailed, leaving me with a tab and a bruised ego. It was creeping past 1 a.m., October 19th, 2024, the house swallowed in darkness except for the TV's faint glow, some old cowboy flick on mute. Tansy, a night owl clerk at the freight depot, wouldn't roll in till sunrise. I figured I'd have the place to lick my wounds solo. Then I heard the clatter of a beer can on the coffee table, and there was Jericho, 49, wiry, slumped in his beat-up leather jacket and work jeans, a little tipsy himself. He patched up bridges for the county, and from the cans littered around, it had been a rough gig. He squinted up, clocked me wobbling in the doorway, and growled, "What's got you back so soon?" I kicked off my soggy boots, nearly face-planted, and flopped into the armchair, spilling the whole sloppy saga, Soren's vanishing act, the bartender's smirk, my voice loud and sloppy. Jericho nodded, sipping his beer, eyes steady on me. When I ran dry, he slammed the can down, leaned in, and said he'd crossed paths with plenty of Sorens, gutless punks who couldn't handle their own messes. His voice was rough, scraped from years of shouting over machinery, and it sparked something in me, though I blamed the liquor. I laughed too loud, said at least someone didn't think I was a total train wreck. He hauled himself up, grabbed 2 fresh beers from the fridge, handed me one with a clink, and dropped onto the couch, closer now, his knee nudging my chair. He launched into tales of his own flops as gruff, gritty stuff about spotting phonies from a mile off. I leaned in, sucked into it, his slate-gray eyes locking on mine too long. I tossed out a shaky quip about him being my hero in scuffed leather, and he chuckled, his hand grazing my shoulder, sticking there. My heart kicked into overdrive, but I didn't flinch. Neither did he. Things sped up fast. He slid nearer, said I was too sharp for clowns like Soren, and I shot back, half teasing, half bold, that maybe I needed someone who wouldn't cut and run. His hand moved to the chair's arm, pinning me as he leaned in, face close, beer and engine grease heavy in the air. I froze, pulse hammering, thinking he might just leap over that line, and I might not stop him. You ever been stuck in a second you know is trouble but can't ditch? That was me, right there. His fingers dug into the chair, but then the TV blasted a saloon shootout, and he pulled back, mumbling about crashing out. I nodded fast, bolted upstairs, head spinning, and dove into bed, chest tight. Morning slammed me awake, head pounding like a freight train, the kind of hangover that laughs at aspirin. It was Sunday, the house hushed except for the faint drip of a leaky faucet. Sunlight stabbed through the kitchen curtains where Jericho stood, pouring coffee into mismatched mugs. Tansy had just dragged in, still in her depot polo, rummaging for breakfast before she'd collapse. I shuffled in, dodging his eyes, but he slid a mug my way, steam curling up. I muttered thanks, sank into a chair, last night's weight hovering like smoke. Tansy yawned, griping about a late shipment, clueless to the storm brewing between us. Jericho leaned on the counter, sipping, and asked how I was holding up after Soren's stunt, chill, like he was just checking in. But his stare lingered, sharp, and I felt it deep. I shrugged, said I'd scrape by, tossed a sarcastic jab about my loser radar. He smirked, said I just hadn't found the real deal yet, and the way he stretched real sent a chill racing through me. Tansy spun around, snagging a granola bar, and asked what we were jabbering about. I locked up, but Jericho jumped in smooth, saying I'd had a lousy night, keeping it fuzzy. She nodded, too fried to dig, and shuffled off to shower, leaving us alone. The second her steps faded, Jericho stepped closer, mug hitting the table with a soft clunk. His voice dropped. Last night got crazy, huh? I nodded, sipping to stall, and admitted I didn't know what possessed me. He said he didn't either, but that sly grin said he wasn't sweating it. I laughed, wobbly, said we shouldn't turn it into a routine. He raised a brow, leaned in, and murmured, maybe we don't have to slam the brakes completely. My stomach flipped, and I snapped he was juggling dynamite. He shrugged, grabbed his keys, said he was off to the hardware store, and left me staring into my coffee, scrambling to make sense of it. That flirty edge from last night? It wasn't fading, it was a live current, dragging me under. He rolled back later with a bag of bolts and a new wrench, acting like we hadn't just danced on a fault line. But when Tansy trudged upstairs to crash, he brushed past me in the hall, his hand skimming my arm, quick, on purpose. I glanced up, caught his wink, and he slipped outside to fiddle with his truck. My phone pinged, somebody texting about a bonfire, but it barely registered. You ever notice how one dumb spark can ignite a wildfire you can't outrun? That's where I was, teetering. Tansy wandered down later, robe on, hunting her phone. Jericho was back inside, grabbing water, and I was on the couch, pretending to scroll. She walked in as he muttered something about me looking good in the morning light, and I coughed loud to cover it. She frowned, asked what I was hacking up, and I stammered about coffee going wrong. Jericho turned, hiding a smirk, and Tansy snagged her phone, muttering about sleep before shuffling off. My heart was a jackhammer. He shot me a look after she left, and I knew we were walking a tightrope with no net. I spent that Sunday trying to shake the hum that wouldn't quit after the kitchen close call. By evening, Jericho suggested we hit the arcade a few streets over, said he needed to unwind after a week of busted bridges and bonehead crews. Tansy was out cold upstairs, so I grabbed my jacket and followed him to his truck, the engine rumbling as we peeled out. The place was a neon jungle, blinking lights, kids screaming, the ping of pinball and fried dough thick in the air. Jericho paid for tokens, handed me a stack, and said I'd better not tank at air hockey. I smirked, told him he'd be the one crying, and we dove in. He scored first, spun around with a cocky grin, said I'd have to hustle to catch him. I lined up a shot, and he stepped close, tweaking my stance, his rough hands brushing mine. My skin buzzed, and I caught a side-eye from a teen at the next game, smirking our way. I scored, turned, and Jericho clapped, said I might have some juice after all. I grinned, told him to watch out, and we kept at it, taunts flying, laughs too big, tension crackling under every move. Mid-game, he went for sodas, and I sat, fiddling with a token. A cashier, 20-something, all piercings, swung by with a tray of fries, paused, and nodded at Jericho across the room. "He your dad?" she asked, curious, maybe suspicious. I fumbled, said no, he's my uncle, forcing a chuckle. She squinted, said we seemed tight, and moved off. My chest clenched. Did she clock something off? Jericho came back, handed me a cola, asked why I looked rattled. I said the table was sticky, took a long sip, dodged his eyes. He didn't push, just sat close, his leg brushing mine under the table for a second before he shifted. We finished, I edged him out, and he said I'd lucked out, promising a rematch. The ride home was quiet, the truck cab feeling smaller, some fuzzy rock tune on low. He caught my eye at a stoplight, and I asked what he was gawking at. He said I held my own out there. I shot back you wasn't half bad either. His hand hovered on the gearshift, inches from my knee, and I didn't budge. You ever feel like you're daring the universe to blink? That was us, pushing it. We got home late, Tansy's car still parked, she hadn't stirred. Jericho cut the engine, and we sat in the dark, silence heavy. He tapped my arm with his knuckles, said I was a blast, voice low. I nodded, said he wasn't the worst, and bailed fast, pulse racing. Inside, he locked up, and I felt him linger as I hit the stairs. I didn't look back, but his stare burned. The line we were towing was thinning, and we weren't backing off. Next afternoon, Jericho was out back, wrestling with a rickety gazebo that had been rotting since spring. Tansy had peeled out for another shift, leaving the house hollow. I watched him from the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hammer pounding nails into warped wood under a drizzly sky. Sweat gleamed on his brow as he worked. I grabbed a lemonade, figured I'd play nice, and stepped out, gravel crunching under my sneakers. He looked up, wiped his face with his arm, and took the glass with a quick grunt, downing half. I perched on a wobbly lawn chair, asked why he didn't hire someone. He laughed, said he liked the sweat, tossed me a hammer, told me to jump in. I grabbed a nail, botched a few swings, and he stepped over, guiding my hand firm, fast. That spark hit again, sharp, and I pulled back, nailed it square. He nodded, said I learned quick. We hammered away, side by side, the rhythm steady, and I caught myself eyeing him, how he moved, all grit and purpose. He joked I'd owe him if the gazebo survived the next storm, and I fired back he'd owe me for not letting it flop. He chuckled, stepped closer, handed me another nail, fingers brushing mine, slow, deliberate. He held my gaze, said I was getting too slick at this, and my throat went dry. I mumbled about practice, but the air got heavy. Then the neighbor, Mrs. Pippa, a busybody with binoculars, poked her head over the hedge, asking if Jericho needed backup. I flinched, dropped the hammer, and he turned, cool as ice, said his sidekick had it handled. She squinted, said we made a solid crew, her tone fishing. I forced a smile, said I was just helping, and she lingered before vanishing. Jericho handed me the hammer, muttered she should mind her own patch, and I laughed, hands shaky. He asked if I was cool. I said yeah, just clumsy, but I felt her nosy vibe lingering. He sank the last nail, stepped back, wiped his hands on his jeans, and sized me up. I said it looked decent. He grinned, said we built something tight, words dripping with double meaning. I didn't know how to reply. We went inside, he grabbed a beer, I stuffed a lemonade, and he flopped on the couch, patting the spot next to me. I hesitated, sat with space, but he slid closer, said I'd earned a breather. His arms stretched along the back, not touching but near, and the pull sharpened, the house too quiet. A few days later, Tansy had a rare day off but spent it chasing errands, leaving us solo by noon. Jericho rolled in early from a sight, dust on his boots, and found me sprawled on the couch, scrolling memes. He dropped his keys, said he needed old crew pics from the garage for a work thing, asked if I'd tag along. I shrugged, ditched my phone, and followed him out, the concrete cold underfoot. The garage was a junkyard, boxes teetering, tools scattered, a flickering bulb swinging overhead. He yanked out a crate labeled Old Gigs, and I knelt beside him, sifting through faded Polaroids and crinkled logs. He handed me a stack, shots of him on bridge jobs, younger, grinning, and I teased his mullet. He elbowed me, laughing, said I wouldn't have hacked the 90s. We kept digging, and he showed me a pic from a river project, said he'd nearly gone overboard once. I said he must have been fearless. He paused, looked at me, and said some gambles were worth it. My gut twisted, but I stuck to the pics, dodging his drift. The crate ran dry, and he leaned back, jacket riding up, flashing a sliver of skin. I reached for another box. He did too, and our hands collided, spilling photos. We crouched to scoop them, heads close, and he grabbed one, a barbecue shot, him laughing, said I'd have vibed there, loud and messy like me. His voice dipped, and I met his eyes, the space shrinking, bulb buzzing. My breath caught. Then the back door banged to Tansy, early, yelling about forgetting her purse. I shot up, heart slamming, and Jericho cursed, shoving pics back. I tossed a stack in, bolted to the kitchen, shouting I was helping with junk. She asked if we needed anything. I squeaked no, and Jericho brushed past, saying he'd found his stuff. She grabbed her purse and left, clueless. He shot me a look, said we dodged one, and I laughed, weak, gripping the counter. We weren't done tempting the edge. Friday hit, Tansy back on nights, and the house felt like ours again. Jericho rolled in, tossed his hard hat, and said he'd been craving a trip to a creek an hour south, Catfish, a break from the grind. I was half watching a prank show and said sure, needing to shake the itch I'd been carrying. We packed a cooler, sodas, bait, rods, and hit the road, truck rattling. The creek was still, a few grizzled anglers dotting the bank, water mirror flat under a fading sun. Jericho set up chairs, handed me a rod, showed me how to hook bait, his hand steady, mine fumbling. I dropped it, and he laughed, said I'd scare the fish off. We cast, sat, and let the silence stretch, loaded, not awkward. He cracked a soda, offered me one, and our fingers brushed, a spark I brushed off. Fish weren't biting, but we didn't care. He spun tales of job site clowns, guys losing hats in mud, brawls over coffee, and I loosened up, told him about sneaking into a festival once. He said he'd have been my wingman. The sun dipped, sky blazing red, and he stood, stretching, shadow over me. I looked up, he held my gaze, said I made days like this pop. I said he wasn't the worst to chill with, voice low. He stepped closer, messed with my line, hand lingering near mine. An old-timer downstream hollered about a catch, and Jericho turned to cheer, giving me air. I grabbed more bait from the truck. He followed, and our arms tangled in the cooler. He didn't pull back, said the day was gold, voice soft. I nodded, caught in it. We stayed till dark, drove back windows down, silence loud. I knew it wasn't just me, it was real, growing. Back home, past midnight, Tansy still out, the house was a cave. I flipped channels, TV flickering. Jericho came down post-shower, damp hair, old tea and sweats, a bag of chips in hand. He dropped beside me, close, tossed the bag between us, said I could pick since he'd hogged the remote last time. I landed on a game show rerun, and he mopped the host's bow tie. I laughed, leg brushing his as I sank in. He stretched his arm along the couch, heat radiating, not touching. I grabbed chips. He swiped some from my hand, fingers grazing slow. I froze, met his grin, shoved him, told him to grab his own. He leaned in, stole another, elbow nudging me. The air thickened, game show fading, his breathing syncing with mine. He muted it, said it was too loud to think, and his hand landed between us. I turned, asked what was up. He said he didn't know how we got here but wasn't mad. I said same, and he slid closer, knee on mine, firm, intentional. Pulse racing, I stayed put. You ready for the big moment? Here it is. He grabbed the chips, set them aside, arm brushing my thigh slow, testing. I held still, watching. He said the creak felt like just us, and I agreed, voice catching. His fingers tapped the cushion, slid, stopped short of mine. I shifted, closed the gap, his fingertips brushing, light, electric. He leaned in, the face close, said I'd been stuck in his head too much. I said he'd been in mine, and he straightened, swung a leg over, hand on my arm, pulling me near. His other hand hit my waist, tugging me half into his lap, heart pounding, his breath warm, close. His grip tightened, sliding me forward, legs tangling, my hands on his chest, his roaming my back. We were locked, tension screaming, then the front door lock clicked. Tansy, early. I yanked back, crashed to the couch's edge, gasping. Jericho stood, raking his hair. I bolted upstairs, muttering about sleep, slammed my door, and leaned against it, shaking. I'd nearly lost it all. Next day, I packed a bag, crashed at a pal's, said I needed space. This is yours now, nameless, 'cause I can't haul it anymore. I spent the night in a blur of shattered sleep and bitter clarity. Every thump of my heart echoed like a warning drum in the silent darkness of my temporary refuge, a friend's spare, cold room. I lay awake, replaying every moment, Jericho's heated glances, the electric brush of his fingertips, and that shattering moment when Tansy's knock shattered our secret. I'd almost lost everything, and now I was running, not just from a place, but from a self I no longer recognized. Morning crept in gray and relentless. I forced myself up and stared out a grimy window at a world that looked too indifferent for what I felt. There was a pull in my gut, a mix of regret and liberation. I recalled the way Jericho's touch ignited something dangerous inside me, a dangerous, magnetic spark that made the chaos feel almost irresistible. But it had all ended in betrayal and confusion. I wasn't sure if I was running toward freedom or further into the labyrinth of a toxic life. With shaky resolve, I packed the remnants of my past, a battered backpack, my phone buzzing with missed calls, and memories I couldn't quite erase. Walking out into the brisk Missoula morning, each step felt heavy yet determined. I couldn't shake the taste of adrenaline, the echo of that forbidden dance with Jericho. The town, with its sleepy streets and indifferent eyes, suddenly felt like a stage for my own private reckoning. I wandered aimlessly at first, passing old storefronts and neon-lit diners, my thoughts swirling as fiercely as the autumn leaves around me. There was a palpable weight in the air, as if every gust of wind carried whispers of my decisions, whispers urging me to confront the storm within. I eventually found myself on the edge of a deserted park, where broken benches and faded murals told stories of better days. I sank onto one of those benches, gripping the cold metal until my knuckles whitened, and allowed the silence to envelope me. It was there that I began to confront the unvarnished truth. I was tired of being tossed aside, tired of living in the shadows of secrets and lies. The echo of Jericho's voice still taunted me. Real was more than just surviving chaos. It was about forging my own identity from the wreckage. With every passing moment, I felt a shift, a subtle but unmistakable rebirth emerging from the debris of that disastrous night. I recalled the raw tension in his eyes, the fierce and forbidden pull that had once promised me an escape from mediocrity. But as the adrenaline faded, the painful cost of that reckless closeness became undeniable. I had been caught in a web of desperate need and a desperate hope that someone could see through the facade of my misery. The truth was, I needed to find strength in my own reflection rather than in someone else's chaotic promise. As the day wore on, I resolved that this would be my turning point. I couldn't undo what had happened, but I could decide what it meant for my future. I took a long walk through the town, letting the crisp air clear my head. Every step was a silent promise to reclaim my narrative, to piece together a life where I wasn't defined by the aftermath of one wild, dangerous night. I remembered fragments of laughter and tears shared with Jericho, but I also remembered the sting of betrayal and the crushing weight of regret. Those memories, however, were now tools, reminders of the fire that once burned inside me and the potential to rise from its ashes. By dusk, I returned to the small motel room I'd rented on a whim. I sat by the window, watching the last light dissolve over the distant peaks, and finally allowed myself to breathe deeply. In that quiet moment, I accepted that my past was a series of imperfect, explosive moments that had carved me into someone resilient and raw. I wouldn't let the chaos define my future. Instead, I would use it as fuel, a brutal, undeniable fuel to become the person I was meant to be. I penned a few lines in a worn journal, each word a testament to the nights I'd spent in fear and the mornings filled with uncertain hope. I wrote about the dangerous allure of self-destruction and the equally potent promise of self-discovery. In the margin, I scribbled a single word, enough. It was a declaration, a promise to no longer let the ghosts of that explosive past dictate my every step. As the darkness of night reclaimed the sky, I knew that somewhere deep within me, a spark still glowed. That spark was now mine alone, untainted by the reckless passion of those wild, chaotic moments. I was free, scarred, defiant, and ready to face whatever came next, on my own terms. And in that final, tender defiance, I found a strange kind of solace, a promise of rebirth amid the ruins.